This is how to choose your role in Rise of Kingdoms. Due to how much popularity the how to choose a troop type to main had, I wanted to also cover the main three roles, those being Rally, Garrison, and Field. So in this video, I want to cover what each one excels at, what you're going to be looking at in terms of tech requirements, gear requirements, and overall difficulty to play, as well as some things to remember and to keep in mind overall as you are picking and choosing and maybe even changing what your main role is. But without further ado, let's get started. So first, I wanted to cover a couple of disclaimers here. First and foremost, this won't be covering any of the subspecialty roles like filler accounts or farm accounts, because they don't really fit a specific role, more as a sub role or something that you do with a spare account rather than your main account. And there are some exceptions. I thank you out there if your main role is filling garrisons. Believe me, I really appreciate you, and I have not forgotten about you. But it's just not something that I can cover very well here, and it may be just a future video topic. Some other things is, while the role may have a specific niche, like you may have a certain spending or gear level, a lot of it is dependent on who your opponents are and what your competition is. So keep that in mind as well, because it may change from kingdom to kingdom or seed to seed. But overall, those are the two things I want you to remember as we begin, and we will get started first with garrisons. As a garrison channel, of course, we're going to start with garrisons. So the things to remember with Garrison is the playstyle is more static with more solid defenses, and you're oriented more towards delaying the enemy rather than being a more active player. So because of that, you tend to be more reactive than proactive, but you can definitely have some opportunities to be proactive as Garrison main. Overall, your goal, though, is to delay the enemy and buy time for your rally to overcome the enemy defense. So, in terms of a sport, you are the defensive side of the sport. Your main typical troop type right now is infantry. It has shifted from time to time, but generally speaking, infantry tends to be far and away the most consistent. The key skill that you're going to need to be a garrison main is knowing when to swap and managing your troop counts and the actual garrison's troops, making sure in a monotype garrison that you're kicking the wrong troop type and that you are getting a fresh march in before your troops' garrison lead tends to get weaker. Gear requirement wise, you have a very high level of gear requirement. You want to have as strong of a gear set as possible, because the stronger the gear, the better your trade. The better your trade, the fewer losses you take. And the fewer losses you take, the longer you can stand there and continue to delay the enemy. But you do have some room for some more miscellaneous pieces and leadership pieces, especially if you're using more mixed defenses. For armaments, you have fairly high requirements as well for the same exact reasons, and the more specialty inscriptions you can get, the better. The current meta commanders are Gorgo, CY, Eleanor, and of course, Heraclius. Heraclius is far and away the most consistent garrison commander right now, so working him into whatever garrison you have is going to help you the most. You should choose this specialty if you want to be a major kingdom contributor, but you're not necessarily into the idea of leading a rally, and you don't mind the increased losses, because as a defender, you can put multiple marches in the same defense, so that's something that tends to be a quagmire, especially for newer players who are not used to doing that and not realizing just how much you can lose in one defense. You also may be a little more defensively or tactically minded. If you have a knack for finding choke points in areas where you can prevent the enemy from going anywhere else and force them to attack one front, that might be something that is a good kit option for you, and garrisons might be a great option for you in that case. Next, we are on to rallies. It's going to sound very similar to garrisons, and as the fact that they are, as a goal, trying to beat each other, it makes total sense. For playstyle, you're more mobile than garrisons, high damage, and oriented towards breaking down and wearing down enemy defenses to advance territory and to burn through the enemy's resource reserves. Your goal as a rally is to break down that garrison, is to burn through enemy troops, and even if you don't necessarily win the rally, you want to win that trade and start wearing down the enemy. Especially since you're taking all deads and the garrison's taking wounded, the better the trade, the better you're going to do overall. The main typical troop type tends to be archers, but just like any other setup, there are a lot of exceptions. Scipio Aemilianus is a great option, and Justinian is as well. Key skill is being able to manage your trade and monitor the overall trades. You can see the little numbers popping up. And while garrisons have to sit there and kind of weather the damage, you can have the ability to cancel the rally, meaning you can actually get out of a fight that is unfavorable. So being able to do that is a huge feather in your cap as a rally lead. Gear requirements are the highest you can possibly have. Rallies are about optimizing for damage and optimizing for putting a punishment on defense, especially since you're naturally disadvantaged because you're not taking any wounded. So you have very little room for error or weaker gear. Although there are some, for example, with infantry, some leadership gear items are better than the actual infantry items. For armament requirements, same thing, extremely high. Essentially, you want your gear and your armaments to be at or above what the enemy garrisons is, because you essentially want that stat advantage to start wearing down your enemy. If you don't have that advantage, you're really spending more to try to do less. The current meta commanders are Scipio Aemilianus, as I mentioned, William Wallace, Tariq, Justinian, Nevsky, Asher, Liang, and Henry, among many, many others, but those are probably the mainstays that you'll see most often. You should choose being a rally main if you enjoy making a huge impact and you're very offensively or creatively oriented, especially if you like to create pressure on enemy forts or trying to find ways to sneak around an enemy front and find a way to flank enemies and generate pressure. And that's generally what you want to look for as a rally main, is trying to find a way to generate as many advantages and keep those advantages as often as possible. So if you can do that well, you are well set up to be a rally main. And last, but certainly not least, we have the field commanders. And these are going to be 90% to 95% of the players in your kingdom. Because even in a 150 player alliance, you may have 5 to 10 rallies and 5 to 10 garrisons, but the remaining 130 to 140 players are all going to be field players, because you don't have a garrison without field. You don't have a rally without field. So you can't really survive without having that field presence. The playstyle tends to be more mobile, more tactical, and extremely open-ended. There's always a new strategy or a new way to try to create pressure, and everything from flanking to focusing enemies down, trying to draw enemies onto your tank marches. There's a growing and nearly infinite number of ways to play the field. So it's definitely the most open-ended and the most well-suited to the fact that it's the largest type of specialty. The main typical troop type in terms of the meta tends to be cavalry, but just like everything else, you have plenty of infantry mains and plenty of archer mains as well. The key skill you need to learn as a field player is target focus. Being able to keep your focus on a specific target and focus down the weakest enemies first is huge for your effectiveness as a field player and as your team's ability to fight the field overall. Gear requirements are the lowest among all the options. The higher the better, of course, but weaker gear is not as hugely detrimental like it is with rallies and garrisons. Similarly, for armaments, armaments are not as huge of a deal, but the better you can have it, the better it's going to be for your trade. In terms of meta commanders, there are far too many to list, but you can go from Huo to Liang to William Wallace and everybody in between. There are so many different options, and that's part of what makes Field, as such a large amount of players, such a great option. You should choose Field, as a majority of players will, if you like open-ended, tactical, while also being simple, easy to pick up, but hard to master. If you have patience and you have creativity, it is something that is going to fit you well, especially if you want to lead the field for your kingdom. But even if you're just following, it's easy to pick up, and easy to put back down if you need to step away. It's a lot more flexible, and it's just generally a good option for most players. And if you want to be able to support your garrison or rally without having to put every single one of your marches into a rally or garrison, because losing 5 marches with the troops is very painful, the field is the next best thing to do, because field control makes both your rallies and your garrisons better. So even when you're not being that lead of the rally or not being the lead of the garrison, you are doing your part to make sure that your garrison or rally succeeds. But with that, we will wrap up our discussion on choosing a role to main. This is not nearly as extensive as it could be, and with this, we have the state of garrisons and rallies in field coming in the near future, or have already been out. So if you want to see more details, you can check those out on my channel, and I will leave links in the description as they turn up. But if you want to change your role, that's a terrific option. If you want to stay where you're at, it's also great too. This is just kind of a guide to fit what your playstyle is to the best role for you. But let me know in the comments, do you have a particular role you're passionate about? As I'm sure you all know, judging by the state of the channel, Garrison's is mine, but let me know what yours is down in the comments as well. If you want to see me cover a different topic, let me know down in the comments as well, or join the Discord using the link in the description. And as always, good luck, fight well, and I will see you on the battlefield.